Alrighty, so mate, I'm just going to quickly take you through my homemade Fogbuster here. This is the actual machine. You've seen this before. It's in a enclosure to keep all the chips in one place. So essentially what I've got is, this is the end piece of the Fogbuster itself. It's just a little piece of plastic, very fine tubing. I've found that works the best to just, once the coolant's mixed with the air, comes out here and it's just the right diameter to make it work. Being tubing, you know, nice and adjustable. So that all comes through and is mixed just in here. So this is where the coolant and the air is mixed. So you can see it's only just before it goes through the actual line to the part. I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see that, but basically I've got the thin tube from this piece going through the tube and it's poking out here. So this is where the liquid can come in. The air comes in at the same time from this top tube, comes back around and into here before going into that white tube, which then sends it back out through here and into the system. So essentially this top piece here is where the air comes in. This bottom one here is where the fluid comes in. I'm using ethanol, or not ethanol, sorry, isopropyl alcohol. Because on aluminium it works pretty well and it evaporates on its own, so it doesn't leave anything behind. So basically these two inlets here come from these two solenoids. Those solenoids are there so I can control, you know, if I just want air or I just want coolant or I want the actual Fogbuster to work, you know, as a Fogbuster. I can turn them on independently from outside the machine, even with the door closed. So they are both fed individually. I've got the coolant line in here and the air line in here. They go back through the machine, you know, finds its way all the way back to the reservoir and all these taps. So essentially what I've got here is the reservoir. This is powered by the same, or sorry, it's, what do you call it? Charged up by the same air as runs the just plain air on its own. This, where do I go next? So once this is pressurized, you can just see inside there, I think, there's a little tube that comes down. That's the tube that basically runs up through the machine to that mixing point I pointed out before. At the same time, there's an air line running in parallel with it that runs to the same place. And so they are both independently controlled, or at least the flow rates are controlled externally. So basically the input to both of these goes through the wall of my box here to two little flow taps. So these are just like little needle, what do they call it? Needle taps or something like that. They just give you really fine control over the flow rates between each. There's the air and the coolant. That way, again, whilst this whole thing's closed, I can still control the coolant flow rates from outside of it without having to open it up and, like, you know, touch the machine while it's running. So those two are basically what control the flow rates to the point where they come to these two solenoids, and then the solenoids are able to switch on and off to control which one's on and off at any time. So it's sort of like a binary on-off and an analog flow rate. Both of these, and the reservoir, the whole system is fed by this regulator. So this regulator just basically says, takes the air from my input here and just regulates it. I run it, I think it was about, 25 psi, somewhere around there. Just means that I don't have to constantly adjust my air compressor every time I hook it up. It's here, it's already preset, I just plug it in, it's ready to go. I know it's at the right pressure. This whole mess of taps here is essentially just a way so I can bleed the system or charge it up. So there's the master switch, you could call it that. That basically turns the whole, puts pressure from the main line that comes out of this to the whole system. So air comes in, goes through the regulator to this particular tap right here. So that turns the whole thing on and off. This top tap is a bleeder, so essentially I can block the incoming air, open this one up, and it lets all the air from the entire system, like from this reservoir and all the lines, lets all that come out. If I switch on this particular tap here at the same time, I'll have to draw up the circuit because it's too hard to explain live. But essentially what it does is puts the pressure backwards through the whole system. So it drives the air through the air line to this point. And because this is such a small outlet and there's so much air trying to get through, what it actually does is put back pressure and pushes all the coolant back through the whole line all the way to the reservoir, and sort of it essentially pushes everything backwards into here, so that way I can clear all the coolant out of the coolant lines and put it all back in the reservoir, so that way, you know, if I want to change something or do something, I can clear the whole thing and you know, not open it up and have coolant, you know, go everywhere. So yeah, essentially I have that on, I turn this off, open up both the solenoids, and it basically discharges the whole system. And then once I'm done, I can isolate the whole system with this one, open this up, and that lets all the pressure out the system. All the rest of this mess of connections here, don't worry too much about it. It's essentially just taking the incoming air, splitting it out into one air line for the coolant system, and the coolant, and one air line for the pure air. The coolant system then comes through here, and the air comes through here, goes out to the two flow control taps that I talked about before. From the two flow control taps, goes back through the whole system, through the ladder chain here, to the two solenoids. Obviously, as I said, they both turn themselves on and off externally. And then once it goes past these two, it's mixed in here, goes through this very thin line that you can see here. It's only about 2 mils external. I think it's about 0.75 internal. That goes through this lock line and out this piece here. The only thing that carries anything at all, come on, focus. The only thing that carries anything at all is this internal thin one here. This external one's purely there just to offer a bit of support. It doesn't actually carry any liquid at all. Battery's running out, but yeah, I think that pretty much covers it anyway. Any questions, you know where to find me, mate. Cool, see ya.